Hey, what is going on, guys? So many of you have asked me to cover the recent video that was made by Reardon, who runs the YouTube channel How to Cook That. She made a video trying to unbiasedly determine whether or not milk is as bad as people say it is from an ethical, environmental, and nutritional perspective. Let's get right into it.
The first argument against milk is out of concern for the cows themselves. A little while ago, there were some videos that came out with undercover footage from some of the dairy farms showing cows being really mistreated. I'm not going to show you the footage because it was quite disturbing. And then sick and injured cows not getting veterinary care, not being looked after. And as I said, it's quite disturbing, and I think everyone would agree that's not okay. It certainly would be illegal to treat animals like that here in Australia. The other thing that people are concerned about, which is not so much the cruelty of the treatment, but the way they're treated. So in order to produce lots of milk, the cows are impregnated every year. The calves are then taken away and fed separately rather than being able to feed off the mother cow. And people don't want that. They want the idea of the cow just being able to go out in the paddock and the calf being able to drink from the cow, and then we still get the milk. But in reality, if you did that, you would need 3 times the number of cows in a herd to get the same amount of milk as you get if you do it the way they currently do it. So that would obviously increase the cost of milk a lot, which is not practical in a lot of places. If you are someone who has plenty of money, there are dairies around that do ethical farming or farming where the cows are left with their calves. And so if you do a bit of Googling, you'll be able to find a dairy that does that.
So I like the fact that she started off with ethics. This is arguably the most important part, given the cruelty that comes with the dairy industry. And I also like that she acknowledged the cruelty that takes part in very common and, factory farming based dairy production. But then she shot to footage uploaded from a YouTube channel titled The Ethical Dairy in order to show that there are some dairy farms which don't separate mothers from their young. Now, of course, I viewed this with pure skepticism because we have to remember that even dairy farms who attempt to, quote, produce dairy ethically are ultimately viewing their cows as pure commodities, and therefore I suspected there had to be some kind of caveat. So I went to their YouTube channel, and lo and behold, they still separate baby calves from their mothers, just not immediately at birth.
Hi everybody, welcome to Rantanen again, the home of the ethical dairy. So today we're going to talk briefly about the cow-calf separation, which is can be a bit of an issue. The cows and calves are together for 5 months, but we start the transition towards separation 2 to 3 months in. So 2 to 3 months after the calves are born, we start separating overnight.
So as you guys just saw, they start the separation process at around 2 to 3 months after birth, rather than at birth like traditional factory farms. So of course this is better than the worst case scenario. But yeah, as discussed before, these animals are commodities to these farmers, and I'm not surprised we came to discover that eventually they would begin to separate the mother cows from their babies. Without human intervention, calves naturally wean themselves off around 10 months, not 2 to 3 months. Of course, it is more profitable to separate mother cows from their calves at birth compared to separating from them around 2 to 3 months, just like it is more profitable to separate a mother cow from their young at 2 to 3 months compared to just letting the mother and calf stay together for the typical 10 months calves take to eventually wean off of their mother's milk. If these dairy farmers were to fully not separate mother cows from their calves and wait out the 10 months, there would be no profit for them because mother cows typically stop producing milk after 10 months. So no, this quote ethical dairy farm doesn't not separate mother cows from their young. They do, just not at the same time that traditional factory farms do at birth. Let's also not forget to ask the question, what do these farmers do around 10 months when these cows stop producing milk? Well, just like basically all accounts of animal agriculture, they forcibly impregnate these cows and repeat the cycle again, because in order for a cow to produce milk, they need to be impregnated. From a profit maximizing perspective, they simply don't have time to wait around and let animals reproduce naturally. So this ethical farm takes part in forcibly impregnating animals. Very ethical. I also could not find anywhere on their channel what they do with these mother cows once they no longer produce milk at a cost-effective rate. But remember, this is a business. It obviously would not be profitable for them to just take care of these animals like a real sanctuary would until they die of old age, while they can no longer produce milk to a degree which is profitable. Seeing as this ethical dairy farm is a business, I think it's very reasonable to assume that in order to maximize profits, they will be sending these dairy cows who can no longer produce milk at a cost-effective rate off to slaughter in order to sell them for beef. So let's just be clear about this. She made the claim that there are dairy farms where cows are left with their calves. Surely the implication here is that they are fully left with their calves and not separated from them. And while making this claim, she showed footage of a quote ethical dairy farm who does separate mother cows from their calves. So maybe she just saw the footage and assumed they were never separated, or she's being dishonest, knows they were being separated and decided to share the farm anyway. Let's be a little charitable to her and assume that she probably just saw the footage and assumed that they were never separated from their mothers. Let's keep going.
There are dairies around that do ethical farming or farming where the cows are left with their calves. And so if you do a bit of Googling, you'll be able to find a dairy that does that, or you could go to milk alternatives.
All right, so she mentions that if you want to avoid cruel farms who do things such as separate mother cows from their young, you can go to these ethical dairy farms for your milk or just get plant-based milk alternatives. Now, as covered already, the ethical dairy farm she covered still separates calves from their mothers. So we can scratch that option and just say, go with the plant-based alternatives.
I found this video very interesting. It said that if we all just asked for milk alternatives in our coffee instead of dairy milk, that it would stamp out the practices that we just talked about at farms.
But if you just add one extra word, you say, I'll have a soy latte, I'll have an oat latte, I'll have an almond latte, or one of the endless milks that now exist. All of that disappears. Right? Your name is no longer attached to that immorality. It's gone. You're no longer responsible. It's as simple as that, right?
In reality, since 1975, the consumption of milk in the US, of liquid milk, has decreased 40% since 1975, and the consumption of milk alternatives has gone up. But as a whole, the dairy consumption has gone up. So that's mainly due to an increase in the amount of butter and cheese and yogurt that's being consumed. So if you decrease this but then you eat your dairy instead, that makes no difference to the cows. They still have to be milked to make those products. So if you are seriously concerned about the cows, you'd have to stop all dairy in your diet, not just switch the milk.
So for those who don't know, this clip was from Cosmic Skeptic and she decides to respond to it. In this clip, Cosmic Skeptic was trying to make the point that in a specific situation where you get a plant milk over a dairy milk, your name is not attached in that specific scenario to the immorality that you would have otherwise supported had you gone with the dairy milk. She responds to him in trying to point out the absurdity of a point he, I don't believe, was actually trying to make. She said that his point was that if we choose to get a plant alternative milk in our coffee, we suddenly stamp out all of the cruelty in dairy farms that she just went over.
I found this video very interesting. It said that if we all just asked for milk alternatives in our coffee instead of dairy milk, that it would stamp out the practices that we just talked about at farms.
Now, this was not his point at all. Cosmic Skeptic does not think that getting plant milk in your Starbucks coffee alone stamps out all of the cruelty on dairy farms or a person's support of cruelty in dairy farms. He said if you go into Starbucks and say you'll have a latte with dairy milk, all the cruelty that we know of that happens in the dairy industry happens on your dime. But if we go with the plant milk, all the cruelty that would have otherwise occurred on your dime had you gotten the dairy no longer is attached to your name. Now, to be fair, maybe Cosmic Skeptic, to be more clear, shouldn't have said no longer, but instead won't be attached to your name within that specific decision or some other better way of wording it. But I mean, being charitable here, I think it's very obvious that Cosmic Skeptic, a vegan activist, does not think that so long as you get plant milk in your coffee at Starbucks and not dairy milk, that you have no other ways of contributing to the dairy industry. I mean, just imagine a vegan activist or an animal rights activist saying that, hey, if you want to stop supporting dairy, just get the plant milk at Starbucks and you're good. Don't worry about any other decision in which you could possibly support dairy.
So if you are seriously concerned about the cows, you'd have to stop all dairy in your diet, not just switch the milks. And then the cows don't get to frolic in a paddock with their calves and live happily ever after. There would be no dairy cows then. They wouldn't be needed anymore, so they just wouldn't exist. So if that appeals to you, go for that. If you like the idea of them frolicking in the fields, go for a boutique.
She then goes on to point out that if we stopped consuming dairy, there would be no more dairy cows. Now, it isn't even clear that this would be the case. It's surely possible to conceive of a world in which everybody is vegan, but cows and bulls still naturally reproduce. She also says something like, oh, so if you enjoy the idea of dairy cows going extinct, you can go with that. But if you enjoy the idea of them frolicking in the field, go for a smaller business. And while saying this, she shows that ethical dairy farm that she claims doesn't separate mother cows from their young when they still do. Also, let's just assume for a moment that the eradication of the dairy industry would indeed lead to the extinction of dairy cows. If species extinction is a problem to her overall, it would still be in her best interest to not support these industries, given animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of species extinction. Alright, so just to summarize this portion of the video, which clearly has been solely based on ethics, I might go into the environmental and health aspect stuff in a little bit. I mean, we're only like 4 minutes into her video, and my video is, I'm not sure how long, but probably around like 9 or 10 minutes by now. Who knows? Anyway, a basic summary for this video is that when it comes to dairy cows or just livestock animals in general, it's going to be hard to find ethical ways in which things are done, because ultimately these animals are still being viewed as property, as a means for profit for a farmer. So we shouldn't be surprised when we end up finding out in the end that yes, baby cows are eventually separated from their mothers, or that cows, when they're no longer producing milk at a cost-effective rate, are eventually murdered for profit. It is not going to be in the interest of a business owner to just, end up feeding an animal and spending the money on the resources to continue to perpetuate the existence of the animal when the animal isn't necessarily giving them anything in return. This is what a sanctuary would do, not a dairy farm. Dairy farms view their cows as commodities, and that's it. You can do certain things here and there to, make your farm deviate a little bit from traditional farming where it's a little bit more ethical, but in the end, these animals are still property. And even if somehow there was a magical way in which, mother cows and baby calves were not separated whatsoever for 10 months and they were still able to extract milk in a way that was profitable for them, the fact is that we are viewing these animals as property. And if you don't find that disgusting, really reflect on what it means to be treated as a commodity and as property. Your purpose from the moment you were born was predetermined to be such that you are just a profit-generating machine for another being. Imagine doing this to human beings, and if you have the position that, oh, that's a false comparison, we could just ask you, like, what is the moral difference between a dairy cow and a human? If you say intelligence, we could say, imagine doing this to mentally disabled humans and using them for milk, but treating them more ethically than mentally disabled human milk producing factory farms. Like, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, these people are being viewed as property. These dairy cows are being viewed as property. It is just not right. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see if I can get around to covering the health aspect and environmental aspects of our video on dairy. If you would like to support my work and help make my work more possible, you can support me on Patreon, and I will see you guys in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid